Hello everyone and welcome to the Eternal Card Breakdown. My name is Em, and today we're going to be looking at the legendaries from the Unleashed set, as well as the new promo card, which is just released today, I believe. Sunken Dogma, a one-cost card that says players can't gain health, and at the start of your turn you gain a red influence. With 16 red influence, your spells deal +4 damage. So yeah, we're going to review the promo, and then we're going to talk about the legendaries. First things first, we have this relic, which is a pretty interesting set of different effects. So you've got two different sort of passive effects here. One, players can't gain health, which allows for preventing a lot of different life gain based strategies, can lock down a lot of life gain focused decks in the meta. Could be a market card if you just want to completely destroy the ability of the opponent to generate health. There is one other card that does this, but it actually costs I think a little bit more in the market, and I don't think the payoff is quite as good, although there is a bit of extra damage associated with it. I think it's something like if players don't play a unit, they take 2 damage. So yeah, in this case we are getting instead players can't gain health and you get extra red influence. Now when you get to 16 influence, that's obviously the big payoff. Your spells deal +4 damage, which is not a small number by any means. Obviously you don't want to wait 16 turns for that to happen, but it's pretty likely to happen just naturally around turn 10 or so, because you're getting consistent tick ups if you play this on turn 1 combined with all the fire influence that you're playing, as long as you're not missing too many power drops, that kind of thing. If you're playing, of course, fire symbols or a lot of other stuff, you can certainly get this going at a pretty reasonable rate and get up to that 16 relatively fast. Once that happens, there is just a ton of potential to do ridiculous nonsense. Most likely, after this thing activates, you're going to be killing your opponent. I've seen someone actually linked a deck with this card in our stream yesterday, which it wasn't out at the time, so I was very confused. But yeah, this kind of heavy influence thing can be used for flash fire and sort of building up all of that sort of heavy influence type stuff, but it's also really, really good with a lot of just basic red cards. A good example is Beaker Blast, a deal 1 damage card that has double damage if you have 2 red influence, and if you have 16 influence, then that's a 1-cost deal 10 damage, which is definitely not a bad thing to get started with. The card I think that this most belongs with, and I think it is very specific to a very specific deck, is 3-cost, deal 3 damage, and unleash. That is I believe a fast spell at the moment, and reducing the cost of that down, combined with Sunken Dogma, means that with very, very little power, you can actually get just an insane burst of damage that will kill your opponent right quick if you are setting that up. So cost reduction combined with influence setup, combined with the players can't gain health so that they're going to be locked at 25, that kind of thing really sets up a very, very specific type of deck. However, I think it also bears noting that this is something where you can use this card just to generate a lot of red influence, while also, benefiting off of the major effect. You don't have to go for this combo to make the card work. In some cases, you can play this card to just play, say, for example, the display of fire, which, or the fire display. I don't remember the exact name of the display. I think it's display of passion, where it's 3 red influence. You can just play that in a deck that's mostly green if you're playing Sunken Dogma. You can try to splash multiple colors for stuff like the big 5-cost warp cards, the 5-cost that warps for 5 red influence. There's a lot of different options where if you have cards that are really, really deep in red influence, you can set up Sunken Dogma as a way to sort of make sure that your opponent isn't doing anything funny, keeping them from gaining health when you yourself don't have any health gain, and then also giving you the influence to easily fix for your stuff and do some interesting mid-range strategies. When you combine all of those together, you can get some pretty impressive decks. Obviously, there's some good stuff to potentially build around with this, but yeah, I think it's a reasonable choice for a 1-cost relic, and considering how much relics can matter in this current format, there's a lot of if when relics get destroyed, it's important, sacrificing relics for effects, and of course just having relics to get benefits off of, say, Lucky Prospector or something along those lines. All of those kinds of lines lead to reasons to play Sunken Dogma, which, yeah, overall seems like a really, really decent card. Okay, so that's the basics of the promo card. Let's go into the real fun stuff. We're going to review Unleashed Legendaries. I believe there are a significant amount of them, and with any luck, we will be able to get through all of them today. I think we've actually only got, okay, it's about 24 to like 30, something like that. So, yeah. Decent number of legendaries to talk about, but there's a lot of interesting ones in the list. So, starting with Caleb, Glory Seeker. Once per turn, you may pay 3 to discard a top random non-power card from your deck. It's currently got a typo, which I'm sure will be fixed eventually. Caleb gets strength this turn equal to his cost, and when he hits the enemy player this turn, you draw that card from your void. So there's a couple of different things going on here. First off, you have a reasonably well-statted hero with a decently healthy stat line. 1-5 for 3 is typically the point where the unit becomes really sticky. It's pretty hard to get rid of these types of cards, so they're more than likely to actually trigger certain effects, benefit from anything that like cares about just having heroes down on the board, and just sort of like be there even though they're not. This card isn't necessarily generating a lot of presence all on its own. Now the sink here is, or the power sink here is that you can pay additional power to get Caleb a pretty decent bonus and the chance to draw the card that you are discarding from your void, thus giving you card advantage. There's a little bit of a question to this payoff. First off, you have to actually discard the card from your deck. Secondly, you have to attack for enough damage that you're not going to like trade with other enemies. So like the card probably has to have like a decent amount of cost to it. So it could just be like, you know, if it's a 1-cost card, Caleb's a 2-5. Is Caleb going to attack it and get that card back? Probably not. If you discard a 9-cost card, then Caleb's like a 10-5, and then people might be inclined to chump block it. So there's kind of a sweet spot here between like when it's a good choice for your opponent to block it, and your opponent is making that choice pretty frequently. However, in situations where you basically just have the run of the place, if you're using a lot of removal or unblockability or flying to get Caleb across, this card is a constant card advantage engine, and that will usually win you some games, especially considering that it also comes with a way to win the game in the form of big damage on Caleb himself. So, pretty complete package, a really decent Scion overall, and I think a good implementation of Caleb that kind of really justifies his current position where he's just kind of looking for glory. Definitely a really interesting legendary. I think in terms of general strength, I'd rate this pretty average, but I think it's got some potential in a lot of different decks and isn't necessarily like particularly weak in any particular deck, which is a strong thing for a Scion to be. All right, next up is Hunting Dragon. We've reviewed this one before, but generally, like, the combination of flying and taunt is pretty interesting. You can pick one or the other, and the flying option is an extremely aggressive, well-statted red unit that should be pretty powerful. Like, the Reckless isn't as much of a bother here because you're playing a 5/4 for 4, and that's a flying dragon that actually hurts quite a lot. If you're playing when dragons matter in Throne, this seems like a pretty reasonable choice for your 4-drop slot. There aren't that many dragons at 4, so this is something where you can actually get a decent amount of benefit off it just from that. But the flexibility of this card, the ability to eat up your opponent's little tokens and force like many multiple blocks against certain types of decks, that kind of stuff really helps out with this card's overall stat line. Obviously, Reckless can still be a problem. This card dies to Lightning Strike. It dies to Chloric Mix if you're contracting the Chloric Mix. It dies to a number of different like effects that care about attacking enemies, and also it dies to just things that are bigger than it. Not that there are that many flyers that are bigger than Hunting Dragon. Like 5/4 is just a stat line where it's going to trade with just about everything under the sun, except maybe like Fourth Tree Elder. But still, I think this card gives good enough to be just a decent tool in any aggro red deck, and just a reasonable thing where if you get this legendary, you can just slot it in. If you're not like building something in particular, if you're mostly just building good stuff.deck, this is the kind of card that really like sort of goes really well in these types of decks, which generally gives me, I generally give those cards around like a B+. So pretty solid stuff. Gift to the Daimyo. Here it's broken at the moment, but at the start of your turn, create and draw a random weapon, then discard at the end of your turn. If you have no units, also play a 2/2 Onion Grunt Exhausted. This actually did work for us yesterday in draft, so reports of it being broken might be very specific to some particular thing. Regardless, this is a pretty interesting card. I really like the fact that it gives you additional cards to play the weapons on. Also, notably, it gives you relic weapons. You can get all sorts of different stuff that actually deals damage to your opponent. You can get removal cards off of Gift to the Daimyo, and just drawing a random removal card every once in a while is really, really strong, even if you aren't like using the weapons to the best effect. I think at 5, this card is an interesting place to take a break for red, but the way that it works usually gives you enough tools that you're kind of into a little bit of a better spot as a result of it. Obviously, taking a turn off to play a card at 5 is pretty rough, and the fact that it gives you an exhausted Oni Grunt is also pretty rough, since that card can't block for you or attack for you the next turn, which means you've got about 2 turns on an empty board where Gift of the Daimyo is not doing much for you. That kind of thing generally leads me to put this in like sort of the C tier. I think it's like an okay card, and it actually does really generate some tools for weapon-based decks in particular. Like, you can really kind of run away with this card in a really specific kind of deck, but the high cost, the fact that it is just like not really all that good on its own, and it just doesn't seem like it would be like amazing in a throne format or anything like that. It's just an okay card overall. Obviously, you're really happy to see this in Draft. It's a constant value engine. In Expedition, it's much stronger than it is in Throne, where in Throne, it's just going to get destroyed almost immediately and also not have as much effect as a lot of the other things that you can be doing in Throne at 5. So, still, pretty wild stuff. Next up, Mass Production. Draw 7 cards at the end of your next turn, discard your hand. If Mass Production is in your hand, it reduces its cost by 1, so from 7 down to as much as 0, since it's not an Unleashed card or anything, so you can just keep on discounting. 4 Fire Influence does make that price a little steep, but as we mentioned, there's a new promo card that it turns out generates a bunch of influence, and also enables small, cheap, easy burn cards that trigger Frenzy to be really, really common in your deck, because you can just kind of set yourself up, get yourself towards that like 15 or 16 mark, play Mass Production, and then go off on a turn of 7 to 10 cards where you just deal a ton of damage, burn your opponent out completely. This is a pretty strong card for a very specific type of deck. I think it will be an Expedition staple deck just because it's like pretty fun to play, pretty simple to design, and pretty like neat overall frenzy mechanics. There's a lot of interesting burn stuff that you can do with this, and it shuts out a lot of life gain related strategies as well. Mass Production is a really, really good card. I think you play this in Throne as well, just because like the cost to play it goes down to 0 if your deck is good at dealing damage to your opponent, which it's a red deck, so it should be. Like, if you're playing piercing shots and all sorts of other, like, ridiculous nonsense, if you're playing with, like, grenades or anything that just deals damage to the opponent incidentally, if you're playing with Yetis and the little ones that, like, Iceberg Scatter Shot that deals damage when you play units, all of these different things just reduce the cost of this card up until the point where you can then draw a bunch of cards, have an entire turn to play with them, have another entire turn to play with them, and then, like, at the end of that, you have to discard your whole hand. Oh, boo-hoo. You have definitely killed them by that point. I think this card's really, really strong. The cost reduction gets it down just so much if you can actually set it up. And even playing it on like 3 or 4 to draw that many cards is really, really good. So there's a lot of potential for this one, and I think that combined with the Relic, this is probably going to be a Throne and Expedition option. In Expedition, it is absolutely a deck, and we will definitely be playing it. I mean, you're going to see some burn cards around. This is a really, really interesting legendary. I'd rate this as like an A-. I think it's real, real good. Okay, Phineas, still here. When Phineas takes damage and survive, he gets +1/+1. The text on this one makes me feel like this character has been mentioned before, but I actually don't know where. He has Entomb, draw an attachment from your void. If it costs less than or equal to Phineas's strength, play it instead. He's also playing against a character who, seen from behind, is in a number of these cards. We'll make a note of him, but he's kind of like a nerdy looking dude who's doing a lot of gambling at the Orc Casino. Okay, so Phineas has some good abilities. 3 cost 2/3 with the ability to get a +1/+1 bonus every single time you do something useful, but also the Entomb means that he always replaces himself with an attachment from your void. So while it is true that you may not have an attachment in your void the turn that you want to play a 3-drop, and it is also true that a 2/3 is not an amazing stat line, the ability to get this guy up to a pretty big amount and then also get some bonus attachments on top of that, like, makes him reasonable. I'm thinking like C+ for this one. I don't think that he plays in Throne just because like his abilities don't do anything extremely magical. The play it instead ability where it basically like actually replays a relic or something along those lines that might be like more helpful to you is pretty interesting, but you still kind of have to build around Phineas's dealing Phineas damage with other stuff in order to get the maximum effect out of that tomb. So there's a lot of hoops to jump through here for a payoff that isn't immediately clear or immediately valuable. Relics are obviously really good, and playing them from your void is also quite strong. You can get an easy like 1 to 2 cost relic very, very quickly, and that means that there's some potential for this card to do some interesting combos. But I think it's still a little bit niche and probably belongs mostly in Expedition. In a draft deck, I think this is a card that you build around, and you can probably build around pretty well because there's a lot of cheap attachments, and there's a lot of ways to deal damage to cards and have them survive. But there's a better example here of, say, Grumbo, the 2-cost 1/1, who just anytime you gain life gets a +1/+1 bonus, where the goal is a lot clearer. You can more easily establish like a really, really large unit out of it, and then like just in general, like that kind of stuff is going to be serving you a little bit better in a limited format. Phineas is an interesting design. I think there's definitely a very specific deck that he's designed for, and I'm sure that we'll discover it in time. But I do think that at the moment he's a little bit niche. Gift of the Arkhanum. This was the first legendary we pulled, the premium pack, so feeling pretty happy about that. 6 cost plus 3 maximum power. At the start of your turn, you gain the power you didn't spend last turn. That being said, I don't think this is that great a card. While plus 3 maximum power is excellent and gets you directly into channel the Tempest setups, it is still just, you know, extra power, which, I mean, Power Stone is a really, really good card. Eternity Core turns out to be a really, really good card as well, despite being like something that you would expect to be a little weaker than Power Stone for its lower cost. Gift of the Arcanum gives even more power for, again, another 2 cost, and also has an extra ability tacked on top of that, but the two things combined, it's still a 6-cost relic that you are playing onto what may be an empty board and getting yourself killed for setting up. And then also, you don't get the huge benefits of power stacking until a little bit later in the game. I think the thing that this really bears comparison to is the Talir, I think, Timeless, 7-cost 7/7, that also has this ability, gain the power you didn't spend last turn. It's a really powerful effect when you have it on a unit, and the unit is like really aggressively kind of going in on this kind of stuff. I believe Talir even like might provide some of that. But like when you're putting it on a relic, this is sort of like, oh yeah, you can stack up a bunch of power and kill your opponent with it, which you certainly can. Expedition-wise, this is probably going to be a keystone in some control lists. In Throne, I think there are a lot of cards that already do this kind of thing, or at least give you enough power that you don't really need to do this kind of thing. But if you can play it cheaply for, like, with, like, Governor Saiin, or, like, basically something that sneaks it out and sort of basically is looking at it for a permanent as opposed to trying to get you a bunch of power, this might see a little play. Overall, I think it's like just generally a C. It's not amazing, it's super fun, and it's really, really interesting in control decks, and it does a lot of like cool things, but all of those things come at a pretty high cost with a significant influence cost attached to them that puts you pretty firmly in time, and it feels a little awkward. Wandering Hamlet, +2/+2 on other units. It's an 8/8, and when you entomb it, you draw 2 cards and give each unit drawn this way +2/+2. So it's 2 Xenon obelisks stacked together on a Sentinel. Not too bad overall. Like, you can definitely do a decent amount of work with that. I think, actually, it's just 1 Xenon obelisk stacked together on a Sentinel. Forgot how good Xenon obelisk is. Yeah, no, because once you're up to 8 power... The Entombability, I think, really sort of justifies this card as a just really decent way to make your board big and do a lot of interesting shenanigans. I don't love it in Throne because it's just expensive, and the Xenon Obelisk effect is better to get cheap and play with a bunch of other like smaller units, but if you're playing just general mid-range, this card will do enough work for you. I'd put it at like a high C, like a C+. It seems okay. It should play really well in Expedition because the effect that it's giving is just game-winning. You're getting a huge Xenon Obelisk buff, you're getting a big Sentinel, and then the Entombability means that even removing it, you just have a lot more threats to deal with, and you're more likely to value out as a result of it. That really kind of puts this card in a great place. It's an unlimited bomb, like absolutely disgusting in a limited format, but the Entombability is just like, oof, yeah, Or yeah, it's there's a lot of nasty stuff happening here, and it's a hard thing to beat. But all of those things are not necessarily dedicated towards any particular plan, and paying 8 for this card is a pretty high cost to pay. If you can't get to 8, then you're going to have a little bit of a hard time justifying this card. And a lot of the ways you might get to 8 are, things like the birthday cake. You can't really get the best benefit out of this card if you're playing relics or other things to get yourself up to the power. You need other cards to really synergize with it. Rewind. Unleash Voidbound, take an additional turn after this one. I would put this card at like a low C-. I don't think it's good. It's very, very expensive, and I hate what it does to like the possibilities. Like, if you can reduce this card down in cost, you just get to take infinite turns and you win. So that's good. And it kind of does that all by itself. So it might be put a little bit higher there in certain throne decks, that kind of thing. There are worlds where you spend too much time reducing rewind down, and then you just get a bunch of extra turns and don't win, which is less good and also really unpleasant. I don't know. I'm not a fan of the design of this card. I don't think additional turn effects should be repeatable on their own. And like, getting up to like 20 power and taking 2 turns is pretty great. Getting this down to like 5 cost or like 4 cost or even like 0 cost, getting this down to 1 cost and then taking 10 turns is a slog. This is a lot to ask. It's a lot of hoops to jump through. This card gets more powerful in Throne with every set released because there's always going to be something that gets you a little bit closer to playing Rewind for the cheapest cost possible. And so you got to keep a pretty close eye on it. But it does have a pretty prohibitive cost. It has fairly prohibitive influence requirements, and the ability that it's granting is amazing and game-winning, but I think there are just better things to do in general. Nonetheless, it's obviously, if you like taking lots of turns, this is a fun way to win a game. I think turbo fogging people is certainly like, yeah, a thing you can do in Eternal. I'd probably give it a little higher than a C, actually. Like, this card plays in niche decks. Like, you can build a rewind deck and it should work, is my thought. And beyond that, like, when it does work, you're more likely to win with it than if it was a deck that you'd built around other cards that are a little bit worse. Getting additional turns is good. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not a fan of this card overall. I think taking additional turns and like Unleash and that kind of thing, this kind of stacks up some of the things that can be frustrating about Eternal, which is like long animation periods and basically like very long multiple turn effects, which is more of a frustration with, I think, Magic the Gathering or things like that, where that kind of like infinite stuff can get really old really fast. And it's more so when you're not like conceding to this kind of stuff. So anyways, Shenron Peacemaker, 5/4, weapons and curses can't be played on it. You and your units are invulnerable to damage this turn. It's 4 cost 5/4, so already has a lot of good things going for it. The fact that it can still be targeted by spells kind of puts it at a point where it's just like, oh yeah, you can just remove this and then it's fine. Like, you vanquish it, you annihilate it, you play the new shadow display on it because that kills heroes and not non-heroes. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways to get rid of Shenron Peacemaker, but nonetheless, she's a little bit sticky. I think the immunity to curses is minor but important in limited formats in particular, where a lot of removal might actually be focused around curses. There's like a 4-cost curse that says like this unit can't attack. There's a couple of things where it kind of like makes that a little bit tricky. And the summon ability is quite strong. You and your units are invulnerable to damage this turn is a really good thing to have out. If you can give this card Ambush, you can use it as another like sort of fog effect. And I think there's becoming a lot more desire for those fog effects, especially in the world where there's an Unleash deal 3 damage card, and a meta where Frenzy is a big deal and dealing a lot of damage in a single turn can trigger a lot of different effects. I think like basically anytime that you're using these like sort of invulnerability to damage effects, you can potentially prevent some very bad things from happening to you. So this card has a lot of things where it's very good against specific decks, and I think that that is something where I'd rate it reasonably highly just due to its general stat line, its endurance effect, and the fact that it just has so many pieces of text that are like, oh yeah, I don't like red decks, I don't like uh, I don't like other people's shadow decks. I don't like curses. I can't play with weapons myself, but like this card can, she can do a lot of different things. And so on top of that, she's just really well statted, has endurance, and is pretty reasonable on a number of different levels. So yeah, card seems quite good. I would say that giving it ambush is probably the thing that is really, really cool if you can aim for it, but it's very hard to give a unit ambush. So most likely this card is just something where you get a really nice, good turn swing, and then if you play multiples of them, you keep getting really good mid-range swings, and that alone leads to it being like a BB plus design. Throne-wise, not sure I'd ever play it in Throne. Expedition-wise, this looks like it's going to be incredibly strong. Limited-wise, you absolutely want this card. Like, it's way too big, and it has that summon ability, which makes your stuff just get free attacks, which is super, super cool. Neutrons Ledger. 5-cost Cursed Relic. When an enemy unit attacks, the enemy player takes 1 debt. So this is an interesting sort of defensive card. Discouraging attacking is usually not a thing that you see very much in Eternal's design. You don't want to, like, force the game to a standstill, so giving people a penalty for attacking is an interesting choice, I think, for a design like this. In addition, like, there's not much you can do with it. You don't really, like, get to do anything to an opponent for having too much debt, and debt is a pretty flexible cost that can be paid in installments in sort of whatever way your opponent wants to, whether they want to like basically just have a bunch of power open when they attack and then take the debt and not be able to play cards this turn, or take a bunch of debt right now and then like pay it off next turn by like playing their best card first. This creates some instances where like it can actually like slow down certain fast spells and like combat tricks, but I think all of that is a lot to I wouldn't say that any of that is particularly good. Like, turning off your opponent's finest hours when they don't have a lot of power early is something that is not really going to be a huge deal when when you're playing a 5-cost relic to do it, is sort of my thought on this. So the card doesn't have a lot of onboard impact. It's clearly pretty obnoxious, but your opponent can manage it in a number of different ways, including just destroying it. And it's high green influence for a card that doesn't actually stop your opponent from attacking you. So I think overall I would rate this one really low. This seems like probably like a D. It doesn't seem like anything that you'd ever really play in Throne. It's pretty bad in Expedition because there's not really anything that you can combo with off of it. You're just playing a 5-cost card that kinda makes attacking hard a little bit. And then on top of that, like, Frenzy is a thing, so there's going to be a lot of non-direct damage to your face. Big single target units can definitely still happen. You can still get attacked by an 8/8 every turn. Like, you can get yourself into a position where this is strong, but it's so much work, and what you get out of it, I think, is not really worth that price. Aura Blade. 7-cost 5/5, Lifesteal. It's a weapon, so it goes on units, not on you. I think I made that mistake early, but it's always important to note the difference between relic weapons and weapons. Just sometimes I see a weapon and it just seems like it's a relic weapon to me. Okay, enemy shadow spells and curses can't be played directly on the wielder, so this is something where you're just basically giving the middle finger to a shadow deck. This is like real middle of the road C-. I think that overall it's something that you're pretty happy to see in a limited format, like amazingly happy to see in a limited format. Your unit is immune to removal spells from shadow decks, and also it has lifesteal, and also it's probably a flyer. Yeah, no, that's a pretty sick time. Like, you can do some pretty ridiculous nonsense to just like win a limited game with this. You're gonna be super happy if you draw it. The like particular inclination towards shadow is something that kind of limits its general strength in Expedition, especially since there's still no markets in Expeditions. This is not something you can just pull out whenever you see a shadow deck. But like, if you're up in Throne, like, yeah, I don't think you play this. It's too expensive for what it's doing. Lifesteal is great, and it's nice to have that on a weapon, but like basically any time that you can actually remove this card with like a Vanquish, for example, or a Topple, or anything that actually kills the unit that isn't Shadow, or if you just permafrost it, Manacles, like there's so many different tools that actually just make this into card disadvantage, while also meaning that you spent 7 on a card that doesn't really give you tempo and only maybe stabilizes you in terms of life. So yeah, it's pretty mediocre, middle of the road, just a really interesting limited card where you're like, oh, I drew this in my sealed deck and I'm really, really happy. Gift to Coastal. When you play a spell, give one of your units +2/+2. Summon, place fetches, decree, defend the treasury, or coastal battle mage. This is a relic. The one thing I have to note about this is that because it has 3 different spells on it, it just kind of looks like a site. Like, but it only plays one of these things. Fetch's Decree is draw a bunch of cards until you have cards equal to your opponent. Coastal Battle Mage is a 3/3 Aegis that gets +1/+1 this turn. And the Defend the Treasury kills an even cost unit. When you play a spell, so Coastal Battle Mage synergizes with Gift of Coastal because you get a 3/3 that then gets +3/+3 every time you play a spell. 2 off the Gift of Coastal, 1 off its own ability. Defend the Treasury synergizes with this because it is a spell, and so you just immediately get a +2/+2 bonus when you play it for 7. And Svetch's Decree synergizes with this because if you're playing this late in the game, you might just want to draw like 10 cards. So the flexibility of this, where it's a 7-cost relic, but it gives you either a good Aegis blocker, or it kills a problem unit, or it gets you back up on card advantage, and it just kind of fixes your current problem. I really like that. I think this is an interesting, flexible option. The actual like passive text on it is not that good. It's decent, but not amazing. It's just one of your units getting a small bonus. But like the fact that this card is just sort of like, oh, I need a particular stabilization and I need it now. That is something that really kind of makes it interesting in relic-based decks, or decks that want to play big relics and do interesting things with big relics. It's not like by any means up there in strength, but I would say like I might give this a high B if inclined to. I'd say in Throne, significantly less valuable. It's fixing a lot of problems, but it's also just, generating some basic stuff. In Expedition, though, this seems like a really great way to stabilize that can actually do a lot of interesting things while being a relic that eventually like benefits you for playing spells. So some cool stuff going on there. Next up, we got Eileen, Hand of the Tempest. 4/4 Aegis, Frenzy +1/+1 and flying this turn, reduces the cost of her ultimate by 1. Pay 9 to play Channel the Tempest. So this was, I think, the first promo, and I was on the record as really, really liking it. Frenzy is really, really good, and the amount of extra damage that you get on top of adding flying to the card makes it pretty worth it. As expected, we have a lot of good Frenzy triggers, the Crinkle Boys, we have the Trick Throw, there's a lot of like really interesting tools, and most of them are in blue. There are a few in red, but like I said, there's definitely a case for this in like that sort of like spell damage based Shopkin deck, where you're generating your red influence off of a relic, but you're generating mostly blue influence otherwise. You can do that kind of like weird nonsense if you want to. Regardless, I think the multiple frenzies are pretty good. You reduce the cost of the ultimate, and you get a bunch of damage across, and you get a Channel the Tempest eventually, which is just a huge amount of card advantage. And this just is a 4/4 with Aegis, apart from that. Like, Throne Warden was like a 5-cost 4/4 with Aegis that gave you like a little bit of life. This is a more aggressive version of that, and like in both circumstances, like these cards create problems. This one can get flying every turn if you're just throwing snowballs at your opponent, and a 5/5 flyer just coming at your face from turn 4 is a problem in Expedition. This is a pretty nasty card under those circumstances. It's still decent in Throne, and I think like even in like a fairly high power format, like the card has Aegis, the card plays Channel the Tempest, and the card can really, really put a clock on your opponent, and all of those things are things you want even in the most high power formats. In Limited, this might just be like one of the strongest legendaries. Like Frenzy is easy to build around, and this card has flying and Aegis, 2 of the most important skills in a draft format, and the card plays Channel the Tempest, which just kills opponents in draft. Like, yeah, no, just straight up, this card's amazing in Limited. Like, it's A+ there. I think it's A to A minus in Expedition, and in Throne, still a high B. Like, pretty crazy nonsense. Okay. Next up we got Gift to Zolta. F minus. This card's pretty bad. 4 cost, when you play another non-weapon relic, transform Gift to Zolta into a copy of the relic and gain an Aegis. Obviously, I'd love this card. Like, all it does is copy other relics and then also protect your relics with Aegis. Two things that are delightful. If you can actually, like, get a relic down that's worth it after playing Gift of Zolta, then great. You get so many cool things out of it. But first off, it has to be a non-weapon relic. You can't play 2 relic weapons, obviously. So, pretty important distinction there. But secondly, like, you know how we talk about relics, and when we're evaluating them, we talk about, oh yeah, 4 is a lot to pay for a relic, and if it doesn't do something amazing, you're usually not very happy with that because your turn 4 is just so important for tempo, right? This is, you take your turn 4 off, then you probably take your turn 5 off because you gotta play another non-weapon relic in order to get more benefits out of that non-weapon relic. That is bad. Do we play? Have we already tried to play this card? Have we already crafted 4 of them? Absolutely. Is this card absolute bottom tier? Oh, yes. Regardless, super fun. It's a good... I don't even know if it's a good design. Copying things is, like, kinda okay, and Relic Aegis is just traditionally a really, like, unpleasant thing to do. So, like, I wouldn't even necessarily give this good points on that, and I don't know what the art is depicting. I guess it's an icy version of the Triumvirate? Like, that's Eileen. I don't know who the other 2 are, so maybe? Yeah, it's not really winning a lot of points on anything other than the fact that, like, sheer greed and the very differentness of it make it a lot more interesting as a card. Yeah, I love it, and it's bad, so there you go. Pelix, Sultan Elder. Important character. Mentioned that I really love the art and character design on this one, because, like, Pelix, great. Super, super cool. He's an antagonist to, like, Shavkan in this one, so, like, that's kind of neat, too. 6 blue, blue, 2/6, and when he attacks, you invoke blue, which is sick, because that just means that every time you're getting aggressive with this fairly healthy unit, you're getting good amounts of card draw, and has a really, really powerful Inspire. Units you draw get +1/+3 in Aegis. All of these things are a pretty good package. Obviously, the card does not have any immediate onboard impact and is vulnerable to removal, and costs 6 and doesn't have an amazing stat line. Like, most 6s are 6/6s or 7/7s, right? Especially even in blue, where, like, you often get, like, Jotuns and other stuff in that particular vein. Still, the card's reasonably sticky. It does generate consistent card advantage, and the Inspire ability is great. Like, that Inspire is just amazing. If you can play this card and then just, like, draw 3 cards off a Curiox's Eye or something, you're already super far ahead. So, like, there is a lot of potential here for this card to be kind of interesting. I would say even in Throne. I think that Curiox control aspect of it does kind of sell me on it a little bit. I'd rate it as, like, a B minus. I think it's just, like, it's not doing anything that's, like, immediately exciting, but, like, if you want to build around it, this card's such an interesting source of card advantage and has reasonable stats to stay alive. So, plus it's in blue, which means you're more likely to have a lot of tools to defend it. You're going to have check raise, you're going to have maybe even 0-cost counterspells. Like, this is a card that I think scales well into Throne, just due to the fact that Throne is going to have much better tools to make the card more usable. Well, whereas in Expedition, which is a lower power format, there's not going to be as much removal, and, like, the removal is going to be, like, more relic weapon focused, maybe. Like, there's going to be some more damage focused removal. That kind of stuff makes it very, very good in Expedition as well. So I'd rank it pretty even across the board. Like, in all 3 setups, I like it. I think it's very good in draft, but it's also pretty late in draft. So yeah, no, it's one of those cards that's just, like, actually about equal in power level regardless of what format you're in, I think. And in all of them, it's pretty good. So, and just a decent design. So, like, you know, this is a solid one. Sundown Accord. I haven't played with this one yet. Really got to build a Sundown Accord deck. But I mean, I haven't played with any of them yet, really, because it's been like a day. But yeah, 6 cost, draw a single faction spell. Important note that it is a single faction spell. Then transform each primal sigil in your deck into a copy of that spell. Yeah, this is probably. I don't know if I'd call it A tier. Like, yeah, I'd give it. I'd still put it in like B, because like this is something where again it's like built around specific decks. I love it in Throne because in Throne you're doing stuff like not only Static Bolt, which we've already talked about in this context, like it's a fun card for Static Bolt, and that's a kind of a dumb deck, but also there's like Premonition Bolt, which is a warp card. So if you transport form every single primal sigil into your deck into a warp card that deals 3 damage, and on top of that maybe you have some spell damage on the board, that kind of ends the game real fast. So yeah, there's some potential here for this to be like completely broken and thrown. I think in Expedition it leads to powerful and fun decks, and so it's like a higher value in Throne than it is in Expedition. But in Expedition it leads to some pretty interesting stuff. So I'd give it like an A minus in Throne, B plus in Expedition. Like it's an interesting card, but it is more niche. And then like in draft ditching all of your primal sigils for being able to draw a spell every turn. It's pretty okay. That's like a B minus effect. That's good, but it isn't necessarily going to win you the game, and it could cause some problems for you down the line. Okay. Next up, we got Saiin Stateless. 4 costs 3/4 lifesteal. When you have a relic summon, the enemy player must choose either give you one of their relics or Saiin deals 4 damage to them. So this is pretty straightforward and simple. More of an expedition card than a throne card because, well, I don't know. If you're playing like Rat Cage type stuff, then you can use this to just constantly deal 4 damage to your opponent every turn. You can give it double damage, and if your opponent doesn't have any relics, then like it deals 8 damage, which is pretty sick. So like there's a mild case for this for Throne. I think it's like middle of like might even be like as far as a C plus, but like C seems B minus E in Expedition. I'd say like we're gonna do like letter grades. I'd say this is pretty okay in Expedition. The ability to steal a relic or deal 4 damage, like it triggers Frenzy, which is quite strong. The enemy player must choose is always something where you're a little bit skeptical of it, but I mean in this case the case is either steal one of their cards or deal some damage to them. So the first thing that I've had with draft experiences is like discovering that Breath of Voprex is a good card again. Like being able to deal a bunch of damage to an opponent on even a conditional basis is really strong in Frenzy decks. And when you're dealing a large amount of damage like that, it kind of really makes the Frenzy decks kill you faster in some pretty serious ways. So, like, this is something where you can stabilize a bunch. If you have your own relics, you're getting additional life off of this particular ability, which is, like, deal 4, gain 4 is a pretty sick stabilization rule. And if you're taking one of their relics, which is something that Shadow is not usually very good at, like, we've talked about Burglarize as sort of like their best option against relics at the moment, but Saiin Stateless here is pretty good too. Like, you play this, you either take their relic or you deal like 4 damage to them and you gain a bunch of life because you've probably got some relics of your own in your deck. Takes a little bit of specific building, but overall pretty good card. Little average, but somewhere where I'd say like it actually belongs in a decent amount of Shadow decks that want to run relics, which Shadow decks that want to run relics are rarish, but not so rare that you wouldn't want to run Saiin in them. The big wheel. Draw an additional card, take damage equal to its cost, but if it's a power, you gain 2 health. So if you're playing cheap aggression, like, this is basically the equivalent of Waxing Moon, I think, is sort of the thing I was thinking of. So, like, that was a card where you drew an additional card, like, every other turn. And this one, you draw an additional card every turn. But you have to be careful not to run, like, really, really expensive cards, unless you somehow have lifesteal. So, yeah, like, I think the health gain off of this is an interesting note, because it allows you to trigger, like, life force effects and other things in Throne, but draw an additional card on a relic is a pretty reasonable thing to have, and when you're having it just to yourself, that really kind of puts you in a good position as far as like control stuff goes. The damage equal to its cost is a pretty significant drawback. You will be killed for this if you aren't building your deck in a specific way, but I think Throne wants a card like this. This is probably an A to A minus in Throne. I think Expedition is super happy to have this and like is willing to take the costs to build something that's pretty fast and aggressive. And I think even in draft, like you're probably willing to run like a bunch of 2 and 3 drops and a big wheel and just hope that the power stabilizes you enough to keep the extra draw making you like actually do the things you want to do. So like yeah, the gaining health off the power is the thing that really makes this worth it, because you are getting like some of that damage that you're taking back, and you're drawing an additional card every turn, which is really, really big in terms of just weighing out with advantage. So quite strong. Black Maw Carnosaur. Deadly, taunt while the enemy player has more units than you, lifesteal while the enemy player has more health than you. I think this is like a pretty middle-of-the-road 5-drop, but like it's so strong for what it's doing. Like, trades really well with a bunch of different units, and stabilizes you in a good way. It's an amazing mid-range option, just solid B across the board. Like, card has semi-killer, card is cheaper than most other cards that would have something like that. Card typically has lifesteal under good circumstances, and when it doesn't have lifesteal, it doesn't matter as much. And the card has deadly, so it trades really well with basically everything that it's attacking. Overall, really reasonable 5-drop. It's big, it's tough, it's deadly. It doesn't have like an immediate onboard impact, but it is something where when you play it, you're not unhappy with that effect, and your opponent probably has to spend time dealing with it. It is something that draws attention and sets you up for doing your next thing pretty easily. And if your opponent doesn't answer it, then you just win. So that's great. It's not like Sandstorm Titan level of strength, but it is pretty close. And like Shadow doesn't have a lot of big chonkers like this that do exactly that kind of stuff. So that's pretty interesting. Gift of the Orc Bank. Your Minotaurs and weapons have +2/+1. Summon, play 2 1/1 Minotaurs with Taunt, which are all actually 3/2 Minotaurs with Taunt. 2 3/2 Minotaurs with Taunt, and all your weapons have +2/+1, and all your other Minotaurs are better. That's pretty reasonable. Throne has some really good Minotaurs, so you could probably play it there. Expedition-wise, I think this is definitely making a case for the Auric Minotaurs deck. I'm not all too interested in Extreme Tribal, and I think that, like, Heavy Tribal Minotaurs is pretty good in both formats, so I would probably give this somewhere along a B. Like, it is something where, yeah, you get good benefits in power level, and, like, definitely makes your Minotaurs valid in a way that is pretty strong. Plus, on top of that, like, the card actually does defend itself. It doesn't, like, immediately kill you because you are playing some blockers and getting yourself into a position where you're not quite as likely to die. So, yeah, pretty reasonable under that respect. And on top of that, like, if you're playing, like, a Tavrod deck or something ridiculous, you can kind of get out of control pretty fast. So there's some potential here. I think that Throne is maybe not quite as keen to have it. It might go down a little bit in that particular setup just because, like, Minotaurs is a pretty restrictive thing to be going after. But in Expedition, like, I mean, this card is still playing a decent amount of stuff for you. You obviously have to build it into a Minotaurs deck, so it can't get too much higher than a B, but it's okay. And I think it does make Minotaurs valid while also making relic weapons and weapons much stronger in ways that are pretty happy for you. Arkhanum's True Heart. Forecast double red, double yellow. Can't die if it has any strength. And when it attacks, it gets +1/+1, and then you increase its ability by +1/+1. Really interesting implementation of the reckless, like, just wheel that spins. Also, this art is amazing. Like, this is Heart of the Vault art, basically. It is yet another Heart of the Vault card, sort of. It actually appears to still be depicting the Heart of the Vault, but the Arkhanum's True Heart is the true Heart of the Vault, I guess. In any case, like, for a forecast card, I really like this one. I think Can't Die is the kind of effect that should definitely raise some eyebrows, especially when this card is not quite doubling in strength, but definitely getting a lot stronger very, very quickly. I mean, it's a 2/2, then it's a 4/4, then it's a 7/7. So, like, when it can't die at all, that is a big problem. This really demands silence in a way that most other cards do not, and there are a lot of decks that just don't have silence and will immediately die to this over the course of several turns. It can't block, obviously, it's going to be continuing to attack, and it's going to force like chumps and stuff. There's a lot of ways to play around this card, but that doesn't change the fact that at 4, like, this is a really good use of your time and a really good use of your resources in generating just an undefeatable engine that continues to pressure your opponent until they are dead. And if it doesn't kill them, like, it still values you out in ways that allow you to focus on other stuff. So yeah, it's a cool one. You can put it down, it can block the first turn because it still can't die, and then after that you just let it go and do its thing, and your opponent has to worry about it and you don't. So yeah, pretty simple stuff. I like this card a lot. I'd give it like a I might give it an A- in Expedition. I think like there's a decent amount of silence in Expedition, but like the chance that this card just wins the game for you is reason enough to play it in a Praxis deck. And in Throne, like, you're going to have a lot more incidental silence, Valkyrie Enforcer, that kind of thing. So the card's much weaker in that respect. Like, I don't know that, like, you play this even over a Sandstorm Titan, but it's tempting, at the very least. I'd probably put it more at, like, a B- in Throne. Like, maybe even a C+. It's pretty bad in Throne. In draft, this card will just kill your opponent. There's nothing they can do about it. Like, draft does have like a significant amount of silence at the very least. Like, you're gonna see just a ton of people playing silence because they don't have removal in draft. So like, yeah, this is something where I wouldn't really put it that highly in draft, but again, just the capacity for this to run over your opponent and let loose all on its own means that it is the kind of card that demands a trade, and when it doesn't get a trade, kills you. And I always value those cards a little bit more highly than units that either don't do anything or can sometimes safely be ignored. Okay. Give chase. Play 2 units from the top 5 cards of your deck that cost 3 or less. They get +2/+2 in charge this turn. At the end of your turn, put them into your hand. So, really good little Rakano card that triggers well with Warcry, Aegis, and charge decks. Well, not really the charge, but just, cheap Rakano aggro. Rakano has like a general problem with its 4 or 5 drop slots. Like, there usually isn't a lot happening in those slots because you're probably just killing your opponent with a bunch of 2 and 3 drops. Give Chase is a card where it acknowledges the fact that you're killing your opponents with a bunch of 2 and 3 drops, and it allows you to kill your opponents with more of your 2 or 3 drops. I think that's pretty reasonable. I think this card probably doesn't play too much in Throne because Throne is just a little faster than that. But in Expedition, this seems like a really solid way to just push on them and do the kind of things that you want to do. So yeah, decently strong, probably like a... I would say it's hard to evaluate this card. I'm going to give it around a B- for power level. I think it's pretty okay. But like, yeah, it's not the most ridiculous in those options. And in Throne, Throne really likes playing a lot of different cards. 2 cards from the top 5 is not too bad, but paying 5 for them and then having to play them again is interesting. On the other hand, this card triggers summon effects twice and triggers killer effects twice. So yeah, there's a little potential there. Maybe like a C+. I would say in Throne you can definitely play it, and it's going to do some wild stuff. In Expedition, when you play it, it's going to kind of value out your opponent pretty fast. So, and really, really pressure them. So, good stuff on that front. 5 is still hard to reach. On Crossbow Ravine, deal a damage to each unit, site, and player. Play a random 1-cost unit. Give it +1/+1 for each damage dealt in this way. That is a cute one when you get it in draft. I've already actually gotten this in draft and played it, and it was fun. I think I built a 10/10 at one point. The 1/1 can be all sorts of interesting things. The best one is obviously Zito. Like, it's just really funny to, like, wrath your opponent's board and then create a 10/10 cat. Like, that's just always a blast. The unit can also be as big as, like, okay, so 12 different units, so you can get up to a total of 26 on top of the 1-cost units original stats. Obviously, that's the ideal. You're probably not gonna get that high, but you know, this is card that creates a unit and does like a mild amount of damage. And you can get more because spell damage. Right, forgot about that. I wouldn't rank this super highly because the deal 1 damage to everything effect is not amazing. It's really, really good in Frenzy decks, and this is like specifically a Frenzy card, I think, just because it's something where you are building advantages while dealing direct damage to your opponent. Frenzy cards should be rated a little higher in Expedition in particular, so I'd still probably only give it like a C+. I would say like this is a card that plays in Frenzy decks, is good in Frenzy decks, it does okay, but isn't like necessarily the thing that wins you the game. It's just another Frenzy trigger. You're happy to have it, but it's possible that you find something cheaper or something better, and you're okay with that. The random 1 cost is really fun, but it isn't necessarily the thing that wins you your Expedition game. In Throne, a random 1 cost is like nothing. You're not too happy about that. Like maybe you get an Aegis unit, maybe you get a Zito and you get like a mild amount of advantage out of it. But like on top of the fact that dealing 1 damage to a bunch of things isn't usually going to kill anything, like this is just like kind of middling. This card gets better when you scale it with spell damage, when you scale it with frenzy cards. You know, it's pretty fun in draft. I'd say this is like, you know, definitely one of those draft cards where you're like, oh yeah, this is a bomb, I should take this and I should play around it. But yeah, overall power level of it is pretty limited. It's just really fun. I love the design of this card though. It is really, really neat. Brickladen Juggernaut, 8 cost 10/10, Reckless Taunt, doesn't heal at the end of turns. I got this card in draft and I didn't run it. It's a reasonable value engine that costs too much. You can't heal it ever. So it is just going to wear down your opponent's units until it dies. And that's a good effect in draft, but the card costs 8 and has Reckless and is not that big. I mean, a 10/10 is big, but eventually this card just dies, right? So this is like a 3 for 1. You're probably pretty happy to play this at the top end of a draft card setup. In Expedition, like, there's no advantage to going to 8 in Stone Scar without just killing your opponent, so it's fairly worthless there. Something like a D, just eh. Like, maybe you get some advantage out of it. Maybe you're playing an engine deck. I don't know. And Throne, like, yeah, I don't think you can even play this in Throne. It's just a solid F in that respect. But, you know, like, engines are fun. This is a really interesting draft card. If you're already in Stone Scar and this pops up, or if you're not in Stone Scar yet and this pops up, then you're probably in Stone Scar. But mostly this is just an interesting card for draft and limited. Sokalis Force Mage. 5/5 charge. When it hits the enemy player, he gets that much strength and health. Summon, give one of your units taunt. This one's straight value. Yeah, just maybe an A- across the board. 5/5 turns into a 10/10 immediately, gives one of your units taunt so you can kill one of your other opponent's units, so probably gets you card advantage on top of that. 6 cost 10/10 with charge, or 6 cost 10/10 with charge, or 6 cost 5/5 with charge, I guess. Like, how do you evaluate this? Because it has charge, because normally, like, if you're like, oh, I got a 6 cost 10/10, I'm pretty happy about that, but it's also a 5/5 with charge, so it's 5 straight damage to the face, which Combrade does not have a lot of tools to do 5 straight damage to the face. It's not unblockable or anything, but with the additional taunt, it probably comes out and actually gets the thing it wants to get. And on top of that, it kills one of your opponent's units, because that's also a thing that you go for. I value taunt a little bit less than Throne, but I think in both circumstances this card is playable. Probably like a B- power level in Throne. Probably an A- in Expedition. I'd say this card is playable, good, and just one of those nice ones that you can always slot into a Combrade deck and get extreme benefit out of in a pretty short period of time. Alright, Diamond of the Valley. Start of each player's turn, they draw an additional card. Players can play an additional power card on each of their turns. Entomb gains 7 health. That Entomb gains 7 health is kind of the thing that makes this interesting, because this is mostly downside, right? Like, when you play the card, your opponent then gets to draw an additional card, and they enjoy the benefits of the additional card before you draw an additional card. In addition, you're playing yourself down one card and card advantage, and the benefits apply to both players. So you're down a card, they're not. Finally, while this sets you up for an advantageous setup or an advantageous deck, because if you're playing around the idea that you're going to be playing additional power, playing lots of big units, playing lots more cards than your opponent, and therefore like actually making more use out of drawing additional cards and playing additional power, if this is a setup that kind of irritates your opponent, then they can just destroy it because it's a 4-cost relic. So all of that like leads this to be pretty low on my list, but that Entomb ability does stabilize you if they destroy it, and disincentivize destroying it enough that opponents might not be quite so willing to jump in on that. I think that puts it a little bit higher for me, but I'd still only rank it in like the high to low C's. I don't think you play it in Throne ever, because Elysian can just do a little bit more. I do think that in Expedition, this card clearly plays in some decks that really just want to be a little bit more everything. And are okay with their opponent getting the same benefits. So there's some potential there, and on top of that, like you can sack the relic to gain health, which makes a little bit more sense if you're trying for a particular strategy based around health gain or based around killing relics for profit. So some potential there, but definitely a pretty low power level card. Neat design. I think like overall I really like this card for the design. Eclipse. Unleash, gain 3 health and scout. If you gain 9 or more this turn, you play a Lux Penumbra. So notable because like while the Unleash does allow it to trigger itself when you pay 9, it's more interesting with other health gain cards that allow you to immediately play the Lux Penumbra. Now the Lux Penumbra, it's worth actually moving this over for this one because this is a pretty important preview and it's only shown on this card. Come on. Show me the thing. Alright, 1 second. Eternal. Hi. You want to move over here, Eternal? Oh my gosh. Alright, here we go. Lux Penumbra. Pay 5 health. It's a 9/9 for 9. Pay 5 health to give your other Radiants and all units in your hand, deck, and void +1/+1. Notable because it's a pay health ability, which means that you can trigger as many times as you have health. And that is kind of a big deal. Like, there are not that many abilities that can be triggered multiple times in Eternal. So if you can figure out a way to gain just like infinity health, you can actually translate it into a infinity amount of +1/+1s. Obviously, you can only go to 999 health, but like, yeah, this sort of makes it so that you can do multiple effects multiple times and trigger that very, very quickly. The thing about it is that like the pay 5 ability, while ultimately repeatable, does not immediately win the game. You just get a bigger Lux Penumbra, and then other Radiants and units in your hand, deck, and void. So not stuff in play, but other Radiants in play get a +1/+1 bonus, which means you kind of have to be playing in Radiants. You also have to be playing in a decent amount of health gain, unless you're trying to reduce Eclipse's cost and play all Radiants. And then the bonus is just like the ability to get your units big enough to kill your opponent completely. So that's a lot of different things. I would say that overall, this is a lot of hoops to jump through to get a benefit that is not going to immediately kill your opponent. But the fact that this card can be triggered very cheaply and potentially even be triggered as soon as turn 3, I would say that's pretty hard. But like if you can actually gain like a lot of life on your turn 3 or 4, play an Eclipse, and get a 9/9 that then buffs your stuff to make you win, that is something where like that deck looks pretty interesting. I think Throne has a lot more Radiance than Expedition, honestly, so I'd give this like maybe a C+ in Throne, and I'd give it like a C in Expedition, but there is something to just like playing this card multiple times, getting a big 9/9, and winning the game with it. The central problem is that the Lux Penumbra is killable, and if you're playing health gain, people can see this card coming a mile away. So it's a little bit hard to actually get this card across, and get the best benefit out of it. I don't think you can play the health gain cost at fast speed in response to like other triggers. Maybe you can. If so, that makes it a little bit better. So like, you play this Eclipse, you get the Lux Penumbra, your opponent death strikes it, and then you gain 5 health multiple times or lose 5 health multiple times to get a bunch of other benefits to your other Radiants. That could create a very out of control board very quickly. The problem is just that it's really, really Radiant focused, which is like just an okay creature type in Eternal. There are a lot of good Radiants, but they are not typically the cards that like most easily win the game. And it's also like health gain focused, which does matter. I like the fact that it actually spends your health to do something beneficial, because a lot of health gain decks mostly just care about reaching that threshold and don't have anything to do with all of the health that you have gained once you have reached that threshold. So using that resource, I think, is pretty important. But overall, pretty low power level, just a really interesting card and a cool design, and good art. I really like the Eclipse. Lux Penumbra, not so much. I can't really show that, I think, but it's not quite as good. Conclave Siege. When one of your units hits the enemy player this turn, play a +3/+3 Gemblade on it and draw a card. So this is something where you are getting a couple of different benefits from the fast spell. Mostly you're getting a decent amount of card draw, but you're not getting any immediate onboard effects from attacking in with all of your units. And if you're attacking with all of your units and you're hitting enough for Conclave Siege to matter, you might as well be winning the game. This works well with Berserk units in particular, which might give it a little bit more of a leg up in Throne, but there aren't that many Berserk units, if any, in this format. And hitting the enemy player, getting a Gemblade, and drawing a card is something that's strictly good in limited type setups. This is something where you're getting delayed gratification, you're putting weapons on units so that they are bigger and better the next time around, but they already had to be big enough or evasive enough to attack through and get the damage that you're getting. So it's possible that you're just going to want to buff this up with, like, play a big weapon on one of these guys or something like that and get the immediate effect as opposed to getting the delayed effect combined with some card draw. So, like, yeah, in a good world, this card draws you 3 cards and makes your board pretty inescapable. In a bad world, this card draws you 1 card and you lose something in a trade and you get a Gemblade. And that's kind of just okay for 6. I think overall it's not amazingly strong. It isn't a trick despite being a fast spell, which is weird. But it is something where if you are already in a position to deal damage to your opponent on the board, then you can do some other like interesting effects with it. The one thing I guess that I would note about it is that frenzy triggers make a little bit of a difference here. The main problem with that is that I can't think of any frenzy triggers in Huru that trigger off of units that don't cost power. And so that kind of puts that pretty low for me. I'd say this is like a solid D. Just doesn't really do a lot. In Throne, you're probably better off doing a lot of other different things. Black Book Pit Boss. 1/7 Endurance Taunt Warcry 2. When it kills a unit, draw a card. When the enemy player discards a spell or attachment of your choice from their hand, it's a 5-cost Minotaur, which means it's competing for Tavrod for slots. So that's something that you got to pay attention to because Tavrod's pretty good. But I think this one actually acquits itself pretty well. So the Warcry 2 is better in Expedition than it is in Throne, because paying 5 for a card that's got Warcry 2 is pretty middling in Throne. Paying 5 for a card that costs Warcry 2 in Expedition is quite strong, because there's just going to be, I think, a little bit lower power level, slower turns. You're more likely to actually get to the next turn with this. Endurance is good effect on a 7 health unit. Taunt is a good effect on a Warcry unit, I think. This is something where you're constantly demanding blockers, and also, like, if this card gets big or gets weapons or gets anything going that makes it a little bit bigger, for example, say a 5-cost relic that boosts all of your Minotaurs by +2/+1, then it's going to be consistently drawing cards on top of that. All of this is pretty solid, and that pitch, I think, is really sweetened by the fact that the enemy player discards a spell or attachment when you play it. Like, playing a unit on 5 that is going to just tie up the board, but also getting rid of one of their spells while doing it, or one of their relic weapons even, that is a big deal. And I think that actually does put this card in a pretty strong place. I'd give it a B in Expedition and a maybe a C plus in Throne. I think that like Minotaurs are just not as strong in Throne, even with the new tools to make Minotaurs better. But like, if you're playing a Minotaur deck in Expedition, you're playing Black Book Pit Boss. This card is just really, really good for all of the different things that it's doing, and it's a really, really fun card to build Minotaurs around. Can't remember. Lobotomies are bad, and this is a pretty bad lobotomy. Choose a unit in the enemy player's deck, so just units, can't pick anything else. Discard each copy from their hand and deck, give them Voidbound. So can get hand and deck, but can't get cards in play, which is an important distinction because it does mean that like that's just kind of be kind of eh. The enemy player draws a card for each copy that they discarded from their hand. Okay. So Voidbound means that you do completely eliminate that unit from the game forever, which means that if you play this card on a deck that has to play a unit of a particular type to win the game, then they lose because they just don't get that unit anymore. It's effectively apigrafted, and it's just gone. There's no way to get rid of Voidbound. You can't like silence the unit because then you'll lose all the things that make the unit worth it. You can't even like silence your own Void typically in that way. And then on top, but the problem with this is that you're imposing card disadvantage on yourself to affect something that isn't the board state. You don't get any card advantage because the enemy draws cards for every card they discard from their hand, which means that even if they had that card in their hand, you don't really get to affect it in any way. This card is very bad. It's also not good design or good art. This is probably the weakest legendary in the set. I would say, man, I mean, it's hard to say that it's worse than the 4-cost Relic that makes Relics copies, but yeah, it's pretty bad. I would say that this card is a market option in Throne, but generally an F, and a real bad card in Expedition that you would play only if there is a meta deck that needs to be attacked with Can't Remember. So like that maybe gives it a D minus because, you know, you can play this card in your Felm deck when you absolutely need to make sure that that one particular Valkyrie deck doesn't have the Valkyrie that makes the entire deck work. Beyond that, like, yeah, I don't know, you're imposing a lot of disadvantage on yourself and skipping your turn 3, so I would say that this is a pretty bad card overall. And in Throne in particular, I think you just have a lot of tools to already do this kind of stuff. The one thing that it kind of ties into is the Throne can't play cards deck. Like if you want to abigraph stuff and also like play your monuments and play all the different cards that say your opponents can't play cards, the ability to just void bind a unit forever is kind of okay in that circumstance. But I don't know. Like this also gives them a chance to draw into the things that you might want them not to play. So I just think it's overall a really bad card in Throne, and I can't imagine playing it in that particular respect. Skycrag 6. 7 cost, draw 6. You pick 6 random heroes with different names. If you didn't have 10 or more total heroes with different names, you discard 3 cards at random. So this specifically says play Highlander, play heroes. If you play Highlander and you play heroes, 7 cost, draw 6 is okay. I don't know. This seems like a D+. It maybe a C- in Expedition. It's okay in power level. The draw is nice, but paying 7 to draw a bunch of cards probably means that you're dying because your deck is based around board presence because you're playing heroes. And, you know, if you have a bunch of heroes that are already winning the game, great. If you have a bunch of heroes that aren't winning the game, then this is maybe a little bit more difficult. It can assemble a combo. If you have a hero-based combo that needs 3 different heroes, then you can easily do this just by putting those heroes into your deck and making sure that they have different names, and you don't have to do Highlander or anything like that. You can just go for the Skycrag 6, play the card, get the cards, and then discard some other heroes that are slightly different names. But overall, I think you mostly have to play this with the 10 or more total heroes, which is a pretty significant restriction for a card that doesn't have onboard presence and only draws you some cards. So, there are some potential workarounds if you're playing around with cards that discard to gain benefits. So like if there's a hero that says when this card is discarded, do something cool, or if discarding there you have a bunch of other cards that say that kind of stuff, then you can maybe play around with that a little bit. You can turn some of the advantages into disadvantages, but overall this is pretty specific in terms of power level, so I'd say that it's probably going to be, you know, like a low D plus to C. It's not an amazing card, but it's okay. It's definitely fun, and I do like fun. Red, yellow, blue, Skycrag 6 is probably a deck that we're going to be building at some point. Designing a bunch of heroes and playing around with them could be really strong. There's even potential for this card to be a bit of a sleeper, just because drawing 6 cards is very good, and it's particularly good in Expedition. I'd trend towards like maybe a C- in Expedition. In Throne, I don't think this card is playable, but it depends on if there's a combo that can be assembled, and assembled very cheaply. By and large, though, probably not amazing. Still, cute design, good theme card, I would say. Like, it's got some nice art to it. It's showing really well what the different characters are doing, and I don't know who all of the Skycrag 6 are, but I believe we'll probably see all of them in the card designs. Maybe already have. So when we start looking at the paintings and the pictures for lore, you can probably find all of the Skycrag 6 somewhere. So important to note and important to check around for. Overall, cool card, low power design, but definitely fun, and nothing wrong with fun. So like overall rating the design of this set, I'd say that like we have a lot of really strong designs. Like basically everything in this set is really, really good. There aren't that many clunkers. I would say the only two that like kind of are iffy designs are Can't Remember and Bricklayed and Juggernaut. And even Juggernaut is like an okay, fun draft card that does like a decent amount of like cool stuff. There's a lot of like interesting things to do. The Unleash mechanics are really, really good. Like the legendaries for this is most of these legendaries are really, really cool, and most of them are reasonably high power expedition cards, so there's some good stuff to play around with and a lot of different styles and things to explore. There are a couple of cards that I feel might be a little bit degenerate. I'm a little worried about Rewind. I'm a little bit worried about some Unleash cards in general, although there aren't that many Unleash legendaries. But yeah, design-wise, seems like a lot of fun cards, seems like a lot of cards that are going to be interesting to play with in Expedition, and I'm very happy for that. Like we got good design there. Overall power level of this, we have a few contenders for Throne, which is important. And beyond that, I would say the Expedition format is at a level that is good, but not so powerful that like it matches some of the other expeditions of the format. I prefer low power formats. I think that like these are cards where you're going to have a lot more fun with them, and you're going to be playing against other decks that will allow you to have a lot more fun with them, so that's always nice. There's a couple of like degenerate burn type decks, but like some decent stuff in there. And I think there are enough good legendaries for Throne that these are worth picking up, to be sure. We mentioned some of the A cards and other really strong ones. I don't think anything is like S tier broken, except maybe Rewind under certain circumstances, but we definitely have some like really, really good options. Mass Production is going to be an interesting one. There's a lot of cool tools that we can play around with in Throne that should be very, very good. So there's enough of a power level to actually justify this this set's presence in Throne. So that's a good set of stuff as well. Good designs all. Fun legendaries, lots of interesting tools to play around with, and really, really decent set altogether. I'm pretty happy with these legendaries. We're going to go to the rares next, and we'll see when that happens. I'm going to be putting out a lot of videos in the next couple of weeks, so we'll see when we get to it, but definitely excited to review more of these cards with you in the future. All right, another hour and 20 minutes of talking about cards down. So, thank you so much for watching, everyone. I'm a Myriad Games on YouTube, a Myriad on Twitch, and you can find me at a Myriad Games on Twitter as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a blast with all these legendaries, and I hope that this guide was a little bit of help in what to craft and what's interesting and what's good. So, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.